Welcome back. We continue now with our coverage of the G20 summit taking place in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. World leaders over the past hour and a half or so have been arriving, and we've been bringing you this live picture as they're being greeted by officials there. Let's bring the discussion back to studio. Xolani Mbanjwa, Newzroom Afrika's business editor, is here to help us understand some of the big issues. Xolani, it's good to see you again. And, I wonder that we can't overstate just how important it is that come 2025, South Africa takes over the baton of the G20.
We are going to be the center of attraction, the center of the focus of the world. That's not because of the summit that's taking place in November, just like the one that's taking place in Buenos Aires in 2025, but because of the meetings that start in January.
Right.
The good thing, when you look at the people who have attended meetings dating back 10 years, they are actually saying that South Africa's theme of solidarity, equality, and sustainable development, and the things it has chosen, because it's the president of the G20 presidency, the country that is the president of the G20 that decides on what we are discussing in each and every meeting. And there's nothing that the G20 in all these meetings doesn't discuss. They discuss everything under the sun. The one thing that is always missing, however, is discussions around military action. Military defense technology. They don't want to discuss that. They want to solve the problems facing the world. And if you look at the 7 themes that South Africa has chosen, because they're already known, the number one thing that was a common thread among all experts that they wished South Africa would put there as a discussion point right through is the debt issue for African countries. 44 of the 75 poorest countries in the world are found on the continent. The biggest indebted countries are on the continent. You can't have this platform as South Africa being this most industrialized economy and not use the platform to discuss how unfair the development finance institutions are in making some of these countries sign these debt agreements, which become an albatross around the small nations. So everybody has been talking about how glad to have seen addressing the debt vulnerability of small countries, of the poorest countries on the African continent. South Africa did that. They put that first up there, including many other things. The reform of the World Trade Organization. He did not, President Cyril Ramaphosa did not only put that down, he has mentioned it since when he was at the UN, he mentioned it, to say we need to reform the World Trade Organization because it is unfair to smaller African nations. Another thing is combating climate change, but at a pace that is affordable for African countries. So Africa, the main theme for South Africa really has Africa at its core, the African Union at its core. And that's a good thing to know because all of the big civil organizations, health leaders around the world, including, there are 20 streams, 20 meetings, 20 conferences under the G20 that actually meet, and it's high-profile people from all the member countries. There's one for parliamentary speakers. The speakers of parliament meet, and they literally tell each other that India, stop throwing chairs at one another. You are embarrassing. There are many people who are saying you wish to be a fly on the wall of how those chats actually go. So there will be different meetings to discuss everything under the sun, but the one thing that's always missing is that part about defense technology, how to advance it. They don't want to talk about that.
Or military action in general, is that off the table in a context where we've got numerous wars, and many of them, particularly on the African continent, perhaps don't receive the kind of attention that the Israel-Gaza or Ukraine-Russia war has been given. But how is that off the table?
It's not off the table so much as you can't hold the leaders accountable to whatever has been declared there. You can't.
Yeah.
It's not an organization. It's not a... So one thing that is missing as well, that has been spoken about, is how the G20 lacks accountability on anything.
Right.
You can't hold people to account. You just hope that their ethical side comes through.
So these are good faith discussions.
These are good faith discussions, exactly. And that is another big talking point that South Africa wants to put in there. Not only South Africa, but Brazil as well. On that point of military action, one thing that has been said this year during the presidency of Brazil is we understand that there's a Ukraine-Russia war. We understand the war in the Middle East. We understand many of the other conflicts that are taking place. But do people know that Sudan is under conflict right now?
Right.
And why isn't it not part of the discussions? It's going to be part of these declarations. It's one of the things I'm looking forward to. So there will be discussions. That's where you start conversations. And there's just a lot of talk that, Ukraine is going to be a big discussion as well. But others are saying that you can't discuss ending the war in Ukraine without the big parties involved. You are actually talking about U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, whose country he's going to decide whether he still funds the Ukraine war and fund Ukraine on this war. And he's the person he has already appointed has said, no, we will stop that funding. He himself has said that. So Volodymyr Zelensky is going to be there at the G20. They are going to be discussing. Biden is going to be there. He's outgoing. So how much can you really discuss that is binding, even when Putin, Russian president, is not going to be there out of his own choice when he said, I'm not going to be part of it. It's going to muddy the waters. Let's go and discuss the other issues that are important in the world. He's basically waiting for Trump to come on, because that's one of the things that Trump has said, that he's willing and he's going to end this particular war. So military action, it's a good faith discussion. All of these are good faith discussions. The weakness of the G20 is that nothing binds the G20.
And there are no accountability measures. No
accountability measures whatsoever. Although there are things that are feasible today that we can actually see that have come from the G20, such as the grey listing of South Africa. The Financial Action Task Force came about because the discussion started at the G20 to end the money laundering, profit shifting, and the funding of terrorism. Let's have a financial action task force that's going to grey list countries. It's going to make doing business around the world tardy, slow. You have to prove what this transaction is, which makes you unattractive, and no economy wants to be unattractive. South Africa is grey listed today because of the FATF, which came from the G20. So there are certain things that are actually tangible, but it is a good faith discussion, and it just lacks the part about holding each other accountable.
Yeah, and that's the key here, isn't it? It's essentially about countries holding you to the discussions that we've had at the G20. And of course, that becomes all the more important in 2025 when South Africa takes over the presidency of this global body. And high up on the agenda for South Africa and for President Cyril Ramaphosa, he says, is the development of Africa and the global south, including a whole raft of reforms. Xolani Mbanjwa, Newzroom Afrika business editor, thanks very much indeed, helping us understand some of the big issues.